All right. Okay, so of course we now have to move into the big news of the week, which was the horrific tragedy that took place in Vegas on Sunday at the concert out there behind the MGM.
Yeah.
And there's at this point there's not any new information that we could disseminate that hasn't already been addressed a million times over. And rightly so. I mean, this is a tragedy of horrific proportions. Of course, it is now the worst mass shooting in U.S. history.
Yeah.
So you have Stephen Paddock, 64 years old, just goes out there. He spends a couple of days stockpiling some 30 some odd weapons in his hotel room, and manages to get a couple of great vantage points from two different windows within his room, and just opens fire. He takes out 59 people, wounds in some way, shape, or form another 515. And it's, what can you say at this point?
Don't touch my guns.
Don't touch your guns.
Don't touch my guns.
That's your response.
That's my response.
Is back to the Second Amendment rights issue.
Don't touch my guns.
Well, I've always been a proponent of the Second Amendment, but even I have to take a step back at this moment in time. I'm not sure what you could do that would change this. I'm not convinced that gun control is going to make a difference. Now, that having been said, this guy acquired all of his weapons completely legally. And though none of the weapons that he used were actually fully automatic, he managed to take advantage of a loophole in the law. He used this this device called a bump stock, which basically allows your finger to stay in one position, and as the recoil moves the weapon back and forth, it causes your finger to keep depressing the trigger, and you have what is basically the same effect as a full automatic weapon.
Maybe a little bit slower.
Yeah, we're talking tenths of a second.
Yeah.
It certainly didn't make any kind of difference to those poor people that were sitting targets down there on the ground.
It did not. But my whole thing about gun control is it's actually not even really so much about the Second Amendment. Although the Second Amendment, I think, states it very well. Because the whole purpose of the Second Amendment is to defend yourself from the tyranny of oppression from the government, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a problem with me not having a gun if nobody else has a gun. But if anybody else has a gun, including the government, I want to be able to have a gun.
But see, very often when you have tragedies of this magnitude, they're often perpetrated by terrorists who don't acquire the weapons legally. This is one of the rare instances where you have a guy who has a stockpile of weapons, and every one of them was acquired legally.
Yeah.
So,
well, here's the one thing that still bothers me about this whole situation. There is no motive. Well,
yeah, that's true. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that can lead you in a lot of different directions. Certainly it's been revealed that there have been some psychological issues within his family. There's also suggestions that he might have carried a grudge against the casinos. They know he had some significant gambling debts, but they also had video of him in one of the casinos apparently slipping and falling. Now, whether that was staged or real is up for interpretation, but it is on video, him falling in the casino, on the casino floor, and he evidently did attempt to sue. That went to arbitration. The arbitrators sided with the casinos. He got nothing. So there's speculation that perhaps he was bent on some kind of revenge. And again, we go back to the psychological issues where it's entirely possible that he just didn't have any remorse or even any concern or feeling for the victims in this, that he was only concerned about himself and his grudge, and never cared one iota about any of the other people.
It's hard for me to have conversations like this without turning it to not even mental health, but just the spiritual side of it. because I think what this guy's experiencing, we're going to see a lot more of because people have abandoned hope. There's no trust in the government. There's no trust in your neighbors. There's very little faith in what anyone can do. And actually, if you're looking at the situation in Las Vegas, from the moment he opened fire, how long before the police were able to get there?
Well, the police actually started responding very shortly afterward, but apparently they were not prepared to deal with the situation.
I don't think anybody would be prepared to deal with it. But my point is this: there's, and this could be considered one of those pro-gun things. Is like, I got a guy in front of me with a gun right now, and me calling 911 is not gonna keep that guy from shooting me right now. But me having a gun might stop that guy from shooting me.
Well, we got to get back into that in a minute. We do have to take a break right now, and we're going to come back in just a couple minutes, and we'll delve further into this particular line of thinking.